I'm a great believer that innovation is not a eureka moment. I'm also a great believer that it is not just about brainstorming. I do believe there are things like disruption techniques. There are things like unpacking the de Bono kind of way of thinking. I do believe those tools are incredibly instrumental and useful in a business. However, I do believe there's a number of things that are more important though. I think the culture of a company, the culture of the CEO, the culture of the executives, the way in which innovation is perceived, the way in which it's rewarded at junior levels, the way in which it's welcomed at junior levels, those elements are fundamentally more important. So culture is a fundamentally important thing in innovation. I think culture is more important than eureka moments, great brainstorm techniques, great disruption techniques, great creative thinking techniques, or anything else. I think once the culture is in place, the process of how to do it and the brainstorming techniques and those kinds of methodologies become important, because then you can start leveraging them. If you look at companies like IDEO, what they will also tell you is that get as much insight in as wide a front as possible to try and generate the ideas. And once it gets to a certain phase in the implementation thereof and the finalization and the prototyping and those things that need to happen, make it a very core and a very targeted team and a very close-knit team that work together, multidisciplinary always. One of the other fascinating things, there's a book called Design-Driven Innovation by a guy called Roberto Verganti, who did a PhD at Harvard, but he's Italian. And one of the fascinating comments he makes is that the discipline of management is a discipline that didn't historically exist in Europe. It is an American innovation. And he says because in Europe, particularly Southern Europe, there was this underlying phenomenon that humanity is part of life, and that you can't really teach somebody to be nice to people. You can't really teach somebody to lead people, because there's an underlying humanity that appreciates other people and the way they interface. Now, we can debate and argue whether that's right or wrong. But Roberto Verganti made one or two comments that were very important in his research. He wanted to know, for instance, why Italian companies are so innovative. And what he found is that the companies that had the greatest external exposure with collaborators, with psychologists, with GPs, with journalists, with radical thinkers, people way out there, those were also the companies that were able to innovate more. In other words, the more you expose yourself to different ways of thinking, the more you are open to that, the more you're receptive to it, the more you are willing to question every single facet of your business, the more likely it is that you will become innovative. But those things are fundamentally important in terms of the value system of a business. Because if your value system won't allow you to do that, you will never be able to do it. And the problem is most companies don't do it. So I think many CEOs are threatened. I think many executives are threatened. A lot of guys are threatened because, you know, maybe my junior will want to come become my boss one day. So there is a whole host of things we do to try and retain the status quo. And again, you cannot change the results or the outcome if the design and how you do it stays the same. If you want to change the outcome and incrementally become more successful or radically become more successful in your brand and your margins and all those elements, then you have to fundamentally start thinking differently.